Hello, my name is Julie, and today I'll be talking about the 13 books that I read in May. That's right, 13. You heard it here. May was my birthday month, and thus I read more books this month than I have read in any other month this year. Very exciting. I think I was aided by the fact that I read a play this month, but even if I negated that play, I still read more pages than any other month, so still happy with that. Sorry this video is a little bit late. I wanted to make sure that my Taskmaster vlog came out last week, so if you haven't seen that, definitely go check that out. I had my TBR for May controlled by Taskmaster Season 19, Episode 1. It was really fun. I loved the prompts that came out of it, and it was really interesting to come up with books for it. So I have very detailed reviews of those books as I'm reading them in that video. I wanted to make sure that got out first, so this video didn't spoil that video. But let's talk about my stats. I read 13 books in May for a total of 4,637 pages. I had an average rating of 3.58, which is my second worst this year, and I had one proper 5-star and one book that could be promoted. The average page count of the books was 356, and I read on average 149 pages a day. I read 8 books from my shelf physically and on audiobook, and I added 13 books to my TBR because it was my birthday. I just did a haul if you want to check out what I got. And I actually unhauled one book from my TBR. So that means this year, even though I had a ton of books that I got this month, I am still in the negatives. I am at -5 for my TBR this year. As for star ratings, I had a couple of 2 stars, I had one 5-star, and did have overwhelming 3 stars, which is a little bit disappointing. For genres, I'm usually all over the place, but this month I felt like it was pretty consistently only a couple genres. I read more mystery, thriller, horror than any other genre, which is surprising, especially because I was reading more mystery, which is the genre of those 3 that I read the least. Followed by science fiction and fantasy, I read 3 books each. For series, I read 1 sequel and 1 conclusion, and the rest were standalones. For mediums, look at that. It's almost exactly a 3rd audiobook, again. And for author familiarity, I just had slightly more authors that were new to me. So the first book that I decided to read this month was for the Buzz Cover Challenge to read a book that has eyes prominently on the cover. So not just a face, but eyes specifically. So I had 2 books I could read. My Instagram voted for me to read Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I received a finished paperback copy of this from the publisher, so thank you so much to Mary Sue Raju Books for sending this to me. This is a general fiction that is focusing on the victims and those affected by one of the most notorious real-life serial killer who was terrorizing Washington, Colorado, and Florida in the 70s. And this book does not want to focus on that real-life person. It wants to focus on how the women who were killed and were around those who were killed were affected. These are fictional women, but they are inspired by the real events. I have read a couple of books that are trying to do the same thing. I don't think any of them have ever been 100% like a 5-star. And I think this is the first time I've read one that is about a specific real serial killer. And I think that this book does a good job of portraying these women as real people, focusing on how they all had so much potential. We mostly follow the sorority president at FSU whose best friend was killed. She is trying to find justice and everything. She wants to be a lawyer, and she's at a place in her life where she could take a path that would be better for her or a path that people want for her. We also, years before, follow one of the girls who was taken from Lake Sammamish, and we are seeing her life up until her death. She was in an abusive living situation, and how with a friend who becomes a lover of hers is turning her life around and finding more joy in her life. And we see these women who are working so hard to make better lives for themselves, and how a man who is portrayed as so clever, so smart that he outwitted everyone, but really was just fumbled around by different police forces who didn't care to actually catch him. I think that this does a good job at what it sets out to do. I think that this is being incorrectly marketed as a thriller. I didn't see it as a thriller because I didn't find it to be thrilling. I think it talks about these women in a very respectful way. I think it portrays them as pretty three-dimensional. I just don't think that this book particularly stood out to me, like the plot or the writing. I think the characters will stay in my mind somewhat, but I just don't think that this particularly stood out to me like I think it has for other people. So this is a little bit more of a it's not you, it's me thing. I understand why so many people are loving this, and I'm giving this a 3.5. Then in my Taskmaster vlog, the first book book that I read was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the second book in the Letters of Enchantment series, which starts with Divine Rivals. It is set on a world that is not our own, but that is highly inspired by the World War eras. Our main characters are two reporters who work at the same newspaper. One of them is a guy who comes from a very privileged family, and one of them is a girl who comes from nothing, and they're a little bit of rivals. She ends up trying to write to her brother who has been called away to war. She's trying to write letters on her typewriter to him. She puts it under the wardrobe, knows it's not going to get to him, and it gets sent to the boy, and the two of them start corresponding. So Roman knows who Iris is when she's writing to him, but Iris doesn't know who Roman is, and the two of them are getting more involved in reporting on the war front over the course of book one. I have grown out of YA a good amount recently. It really hasn't been working for me, but I was really emotionally invested in book one. I didn't think that the fantasy elements were doing anything, and I had heard that a lot of people weren't loving book two as much, and I was wondering if it was going to be because of the fantasy elements that weren't built out in book one. And I do think that that's kind of the case. The first, third of this book had a really interesting reversal of roles for the characters that built up a lot of tension. I was really invested in the way that the characters are interacting with each other, and then that kind of gets solved really fast. I kind of wish that had gone on for longer, and our two characters could have found out information separately. I think as the book went along, there was less tension and there was more Deus Ex Machina when it came to the fantasy plot, because basically nothing was set up in book one. Almost all of the what needs to happen with the gods to make sure they stop fighting are introduced in this book. They don't feel big and important. It feels like, oh look, plot device. So I completely understand why this one is the lesser favorite of the two. I feel like these two characters are the reason to read this series. I think this is a really interesting thing for young adults to be reading. I liked it. It's not as good as book one, but I'm glad that I finished out the duology. I think I'm giving it another 3.5. I think that there was some big work that could have been done to improve this one. Then I listened to Be Taught If Fortunate by Becky Chambers. This is for my 12 Friends, 12 Books, 12 Months challenge. I started the Wayfarer series and I've read both of the Monk and Robot novellas, and this was one that I had vaguely known about but hadn't really heard anybody say anything about it. So this is about our main character Ariadne, who is an astronaut, and her crew have been sent on a very long-term mission that is supposed to be most of their life to outer planets, that humans are trying to find other planets that they might be able to live on. And because they are so far away from Earth, they very rarely hear what's going on Earth when they do get reports, and they're also very behind on what is being reported. This doesn't have a very strong plot line. It's more like ideas as things are happening, but we follow Ariadne and the crew as they are visiting different planets, and instead of, terraforming there, human technology has gotten to a point where there are some adaptations that the people themselves are getting so that they can explore these planets, which is very cool. This is very short. This is only a couple-hour audiobook. I listened to almost all of it in one day when I had a very long drive to do. For a lot of this book, I was like, okay, this is cool, but what's the point? And the point is getting to the end. I think if you're thinking that halfway through this book, finish it out, because I think it leaves you with a very important thing to ponder. I liked seeing the complicated emotions that the crew is having, because they are so separate from Earth society now that when they're seeing things about Earth, they're like, how much should we react to this? I liked learning about the science. I loved seeing how the things that they were finding were so revolutionary and were going to change things. I liked the little bit of relationships we're seeing between all the different characters and how they become a family. Less so than in something like the Wayfarers. This is less character focused than Becky Chambers' other stuff, so if you're looking for another found family book, this has a little bit of that. Yes, these people are very close, but it's certainly not the focus of the book. If you had not told me this was Becky Chambers, I don't think I would have been able to identify it, because those two series that she has have such a strong through line. But I think sort of the philosophy of Monk and Robot, you can kind of see that same thread. I think this is a book that will make a lot of people think. It almost made me think of Interstellar a little bit. I really enjoyed it. I'm giving a 4.25, and it'll keep keep me thinking. Then also for my Taskmaster vlog, I read Light from Uncommon Stars by Reika Aoki. This is a sci-fi fantasy book that is about a lot of stuff. Okay, we have Shizuka Saitomi, who is a violin teacher. She was a prodigy back in her day, but she has since retired and has brought all of these 6 people, different violinists over the years, to the absolute heights of the violin world, and all of them have met strange ends. And it turns out that she has actually sold her soul. She has to give 7 violinists souls to hell in order to be able to play again. And she has been looking out for a while for her 7th person. And she ends up finding Katrina Wen, who is a trans runaway, who is essentially homeless at the very beginning of this book, and starts playing just in a park. And Saitomi finds her and is like, you are my next student. I know you're not skilled, but I can hear in your tone that you are such a unique player. You're gonna be my new person. And on top of that, there's also an alien who has run away with her family from this empire and is setting up some technology behind the front of this donut shop. This is a deeply, deeply queer book. I think there is a lot of affirming narrative here. I love Katrina. I love all of our characters here. I think this book is so creative in what it's doing. It balances a lot of different tones and different types of speculative elements. I love the found family aspect of this. And I thought that this did a very good job balancing the tone of being serious and sad and healing from the serious and sad things, and also occasionally there's some silly stuff going on like with the donut shop, but it still stays a cohesive whole. So I think that that was very good, and I enjoyed my time with this. I didn't want to put it down, and I think I'm going to be giving this a 4.25. I think this is definitely for people who like stuff like Becky Chambers. Then in one sitting for my Taskmaster vlog, I read A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. This is a play that first debuted in 1959, and it is about a Black family on the south side of Chicago. This family has been living in a pretty small apartment, living on top of each other for so long that they are at wit's end with each other. They are constantly going into arguments that do not end and picking up where they left off anytime they have any sort of conversation. And tensions are particularly high because they are about to come into a good amount of money because the grandfather passed away and his insurance money is going to be coming through. And Mama, who is the grandmother of this family, is going to be getting the money. So we mostly have these 4 adults. Every single person here is just wanting to do what they think the best thing for the family is, and also wanting to pursue their dreams, and all of their dreams are sometimes in conflict. And I cannot believe how powerful this was as a script, because plays are better experienced as a play. This is one of the most powerful scripts I have read. Every single word feels so purposeful. Characters just jump off the page at you. They feel like real people, and they feel like they have had real conflict over the course of years, and everything is just boiling to the surface. I have not read such real characters in a long time. Every single person has something that you are rooting for them for and rooting them against. They all have defined characters, but are also like 3-dimensional, and they are all picking on each other and thinking that they're the victim, even though everybody is stepping on each other. There are some characters that are more in the wrong than others, but nobody's perfect. And I really enjoyed seeing this deep look into how Black families and people who are oppressed are put under so much pressure. And that pressure can cause ripples throughout people's lives and relationships and families that people aren't even able to breathe. And that's sort of personified in the apartment that they have been living in. I just think that this is one of the best written things that I have read in a long time, and I want to learn everything I can about Lorraine Hansberry. She is the youngest person ever to win like the Drama Desk Award, even to this day. That was in the 50s or 60s that she won that. So I will be trying to watch the original Sidney Poitier version of this very soon. Do I need to tell you that this was my 5-star of the month? Because this was was incredible. Then for that Taskmaster video, I listened to Their Vicious Games. This is a YA thriller that is supposed to be a take on Final Girls and Eat the Rich satire. So our main character is a black girl who is at a prep high school, and she has worked all of her life to go to an Ivy League school. And she got in, and then when one of her supposed friends, who is rich and white, started making all of these comments about how she's only getting these things because she's black, our main character ends up spreading rumors that are probably true. They end up fighting, and suddenly all of our main character's offers go away. But in this town, there is this really powerful rich family. They have this thing called the Finish that they do every year for senior girls. It is a competition to basically get the family to do whatever they want for you. If you need connections, they'll get you connections. People who were rejected from school suddenly are getting into them. They get all the jobs. They get to be Congress people. And now that she's been rejected from these schools, she needs to join the Finish, and she ends up doing that. And all of these girls, like 20 girls, are put in this house, and it's her. She's the only black girl there. There's an Asian girl who's her roommate, and everybody else is super white, and everyone but her is super rich. It slowly becomes apparent this is not just a competition, it is actually a competition to the death. And our main character did not sign up for that, but she can't leave or her family is under threat. I love an eat the rich thriller. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy this type of commentary, but I just think it's so impressive for somebody to make something that's supposed to be a slasher and turn it into something boring. I'm so sorry. I could not find this interesting. I think the part of this book before she actually went to the Finish was more interesting than the competition itself. I think there was so much downtime between things happening, and there wasn't a lot of like preamble to what the competitions were, and then the competitions were happening and it didn't feel like I was in it, that I just like didn't care. These two girls are playing War, the card game where you're just flipping over cards. The people in the book are like, wow, the game War has never been so compelling, and I'm like, it isn't. I think the commentary here was good. I listened to the audiobook and I liked the narrator. I just couldn't be bothered. I didn't think that any one element of this stood out. Everything just felt that things were just being placed there as they were happening. So I'm giving this a 3-star. I don't think I would particularly recommend this unless somebody was specifically looking for a YA thriller with this vibe. Then the last book that I read for this vlog was Orics and Craig by Margaret Atwood, which is one of my TBR veterans I had been meaning to get to this year, so I was very glad I could fit it in. So this is about our main character, Snowman, who was known as Jimmy before this plague happened. The vast majority of the plot of this book is following Jimmy from when he is a child to enter his teenage years when he meets this guy named Craig, and then into his college years. As slowly as he's getting older, the world is getting more and more messed up. There's a lot of capitalistic corporate greed. There is a lot of like biological changes in engineering going on in this book that are more and more messed up as the book goes on. But scattered throughout are these chapters from Snowman, which is Jimmy once the apocalypse has happened, and he seems to be the only human around, but he is not the only humanoid around. It seems that his friend Craig, who he grew up with, and then a woman that they both loved named Orics, they had somehow created these creatures that are supposed to be better than human. Okay, what do I want to say about this book? I don't know what I want to say about this book. I have read 2 Margaret Atwoods before this. I have read The Handmaid's Tale and I read Cat's Cradle, and I loved them both. Let alone Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale. I was shocked this was written by women, and maybe that just means she is such a good writer that she just like method acted into being a man. Jimmy is not a good person. He's not supposed to be. I hate the way that he talks about women, and it made me not want to read this book. On purpose, we are only seeing the changes kind of subtly happen around Jimmy while he's trying to tell his life story, which his life story is not that interesting. I think that the commentary here, talking about how having such a capitalistic society is forcing scientific endeavors to be bad for humanity, because the only way for you to make a profit is for you to screw people over, specifically in our healthcare system. But the way that this was written was so infuriating, particularly in the first half. I think as the second half went on, Jimmy doesn't have time to be an infuriating narrator because like more important shit's going on. It's not even like, oh, the writing style is bad. It's like we are in the head of a character that I cannot stand, and I didn't feel like there was enough redeeming around him. I really wasn't sure what was going on with Oryx. We never get like a really straight answer on how the two of them are connected. The reason that he is interested in her is because when he was a child, he watched child corn. He, as an adult, is still obsessed with that child corn, and I'm like, that was awful. Like, this is not a book that I would widely recommend to people, even with that commentary. I don't know. I just don't think this book is for me. This has 2 sequels that are like in the same world. Some of them take place at the same time as this one. I'm really unclear on how the series continues, but I didn't really intend on continuing, but I definitely don't now. I'm sorry, Margaret, it's not for me. I'm giving it a 2.5. I think the commentary is good, and that's about it. Then for my book club 3 of clubs, we read The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams for our Books and Writer's Hand. If you would like to read with us in June, we are going to be reading Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor, which is actually the second Nnedi Okorafor we're reading this year. Go figure. This is about a teenage girl and a grandfather. They are not related, but they are bonding over discovering the love of reading. The grandfather character has lost his wife who loved reading. He ends up finding a library book that was never returned when she died. He ends up going to the library and is wanting to reconnect with his wife that way. Our teenage main character is a girl who, her brother used to work at the library, and so she just knew she had an in there. She doesn't care about reading. She thinks it's pointless. The two of them meet when he, who knows nothing about books, is asking for a recommendation, and she, who knows nothing about books, is like, why the hell are you asking me? Even though she's literally a librarian, that's her job. Seconds after, she ends up finding a list of books and a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird that says, in case you need it. And the way that this book was advertised was that it was a list of books she's never heard of. So I went into this book that I picked for the club thinking that it was going to be a list of either fictional books or books that are more obscure that maybe people hadn't read. But then in the first chapter, we see what the list of books is. I will find the list, I'll put it here. All of these books are some of the most famous books in the English language. And I was kind of like, okay, that's gonna be interesting to see how this author is talking about these books that all but one I have read. I think this book is a little bit trying to advertise reading, and I don't think that this book is popular enough for people who do not regularly read to read this book. I don't really know who this book is for. I think it might be for people who don't read a lot, maybe someone who's read like 2 books off this list, but it doesn't have a lot to do with the books. And then when it has a little bit of, oh, what is the takeaways of these books? I feel like it's pretty elementary. So it did feel like it was talking down to me a little bit. I also thought it was strange how unevenly balanced the different books were talked about. How like, okay, I'm a little biased. Pride and Prejudice is tied for my favorite book of all time. It was really impactful for me. They barely talk about Pride and Prejudice, and then when they do, they just say it's just a fun, easy read, as if it has no literary value. They don't even talk about A Suitable Boy. That's just like the next book they're gonna read, and I was like, no, that's the one I haven't read. I would have liked to hear about it. I don't know. I think that this book has like a found family community thing that will like just generally work for people, but I don't think it will stand out when there are a lot of books that sort of have the same vibe going on. And I also think that there was a plot line that ends up happening like 2/3 of the way through the book that could be triggering to some people, that it feels like it sort of comes out of nowhere, or at least it's not like an advertised part of the book. I did not feel strongly about this book, and it felt really weird to me that I was reading a book that was like advertising reading. Also, the fact that everybody is like jumping out of their skin while reading Rebecca is ridiculous to me. I'm sorry, I've read the book. It's really good. It's gothic. I don't think it's jumping at vacuum cleaners scary. Maybe that's just me. Then I read The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. This is the 4th book in the Thursday Murder Club series. The 5th book is coming out later this year. This is about a group of septuagenarians who live at this retirement community, and they come together to solve cold cases, and then at the beginning of the 1st book, a murder actually happens in their little town. They decide to start solving real things that are happening around them. And in this book, a friend of the group who has appeared in previous books ends up dying because some drug dealers gave him like 1,000 pounds worth of heroin. They were supposed to pick it up like the next day. So they were money laundering through him. In the 24 hours between this being dropped off with him and pickup, he ends up being killed. And the Thursday Murder Club is trying to figure out why they wanted to kill him, what he wanted to do with the drugs that made them kill him before the pickup, and what is with the drugs that everyone's freaking out about. On top of that, there is a more emotional part of this particular book that has been building over the course of the other books, because one of the people in their inner circle is ailing and they are having to emotionally deal with that in this book. So I understand why people are putting this up as one of the best books in the series because of that emotional journey. Is it a spoiler if I tell you what this book is dealing with? Like, we address it, I think, in book 1. It's so sad to see this character not be able to be themselves anymore because of what is happening to their body. The way that our main characters are reacting to that and everything, it's very emotional. I think the language around it was done very well, and I believe that this is something that has touched Richard Osman's life as well. I think that this might be my favorite in terms of interacting with our main characters in that way, separate from the mystery. In terms of the mystery, I thought this was alright. I think that this does a good bait and switch. There's one particular twist that I thought was really fun and set up well. One of the things that ended up being a big answer at the end, I kind of didn't care about, but I also think that that wasn't necessarily like the biggest deal, because that's not, the book doesn't necessarily need you to care about that thing. There are other kind of more important things going on. I'm usually not a huge straight up mystery reader, but this series is very consistent in its quality. I'm always giving it, you know, a solid 4-star, and this is just a really easy read series for me. Characters I enjoy, of writing that I enjoy, that I know I'm gonna get a good rating out of every single time. Really enjoyed it, can't wait for next book. Speaking of mysteries, I read Malice by Kaigo Higashino. This is another book that was on my 12 Friends, 12 Books, 12 Months challenge. If you haven't figured it out, I'm almost done with that. I think I have 2 books left. This is a mystery that has been translated from Japanese. This is the same author, and I think possibly the same series as The Devotion of Suspect X, which is more popular in the English-speaking sphere. But this is about, let me get the characters' names. There is Hidaka, who is a novelist, and there is Nanaguchi. They went to the same school as children, ended up meeting as adults and becoming friends. And Hidaka has set up Nanaguchi to be able to like write in children's fiction. Hidaka is about to move to Canada, and the night before he is about to move and he's supposed to be like sending off chapters for his serial book that he's working on, he is actually murdered in his house. The person who has closest witnessed this is Nanaguchi. So we are seeing from 2 perspectives. We are seeing from Nanaguchi, and then we are seeing from Detective Kaga, who is like the detective throughout this series. I have read 2 translated thrillers, and both of them were Japanese. And I think it's really interesting because both of those do not have the same structure as English mysteries do. I think English mysteries might be so locked into trying to be Agatha Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, that they have like a set structure that we all expect. And this book, I think, is interesting if you are wanting a mystery that does not follow that same sort of plot line. I think it's interesting to see as we follow from these 2 different perspectives as events are being accounted differently. This had an interesting ending that I don't think I've ever seen before, but I did feel pretty disconnected from the narrative. This is a very tell it to you straight book. There is not like flowery prose going on. You're not connected to the characters emotionally at all. It is just matter of fact. This happened, this happened, this happened. If you are looking for straight up a mystery, you're gonna be intellectually invested, but not necessarily emotionally invested, I think this is one that could work for a lot of people, and I think it'll be different from a lot of books that people have read. I think am I giving this like a 3.75? Because I think I was interested in it. I read it very easily in 2 days, but I don't know how long the story is gonna stick with me. Then I listened to Immortal by Su Lin Tun. I love Daughter of the Moon Goddess from this author, and then I hated the sequel and conclusion. So I was a little bit hesitant about starting this book, but I wanted to try it out anyway. Maybe that one was a fluke. And then I was a little bit worried about the synopsis, and it did ended up kind of being a little bit more like the book I didn't love. So our main character is a mortal princess, and her grandfather is the emperor of this mortal kingdom that has been like shielded away from the rest of the mortal world by the gods, who are immortals. Our main character gets like poisoned. Her grandfather ends up stealing something that the gods wanted in order to save her life. This is gonna be so long. I've been talking for so fucking long. I've been talking for an hour at this point, and I still have 2 more books to go on top of this one. So that ends up saving her life, but the gods end up killing her grandfather, and she has to ascend to the throne. And now she is having to deal with the gods and sort of pledge her loyalty, but she doesn't want to pledge loyalty to the people who have harmed her community. She is mostly dealing with the god of war, who she also thinks is hot. This was being advertised as fantasy and not fantasy romance, and the same thing happened with The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and I enjoyed the romance in that. So I was like, even though this sounds like maybe not for me, I thought I'd give it a shot anyway, because I didn't think Daughter of the Moon Goddess would be for me either. I think this book suffers from Deus Ex Machina so bad. Everything is just sort of presented in front of our main character on a platter. I hated how instantaneous the romance between these characters was. I am really, really sick of the whole enemies to lovers. Oh, he killed my people, so I hate him, but he's hot and he treats me well, and then it turns out he actually didn't kill my people. I think every single fantasy romance book is doing that, copy paste, and I'm sick of reading it. I found it really hard to be invested in the storyline when it didn't feel like anything had a reason for happening. It was just happening. I still think this author has pretty good prose as far as that goes, but like I didn't think that this main character really stood for a whole lot. There was a plot twist that I ended up liking and I didn't necessarily see coming, and I thought that that made the first half of the book make a lot more sense, but then I didn't love how it was executed on in the second half of the book. I have seen that exact same plot twist be done way, way better. This book is an easy 2-star for me, and it's one of my least favorite books I've read this year, unfortunately. Then I listened to Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister, which is another 2025 release from an author who I've really enjoyed before. I heard kind of mixed things about this book and decided to listen to it anyway because there was a sale on Libro FM for these 2 books. This is about our main character, Cam. Her maternity leave has just ended. Her kid is going to daycare for the first time, and her loving husband ends up like leaving really early that morning, leaving a note, and then she goes to work. The news is on, and there is a hostage situation happening near where her husband works, and the police end up coming into her work and saying, "Hi, your husband is actually the one who has taken the hostages. Please give us information so we can figure this out." The first act of this book is a high tension thriller of the actual hostage situation, and then the second and third acts are years afterwards and fallout of the hostage situation. And I think that that is important to know going in, because the second and third parts of this book are slower. It's more of a mystery. There's less stuff going on. There's less information being imparted to you like quickly. I quite enjoyed the high tension part of this book. I was really engaged. I wanted to keep listening. I wanted to know what was going on. And then we get into the other part of the book and I felt less interested. I didn't feel like enough was happening. Our main character has stagnated, and that's sort of a problem that her family wants to get her through, of like, you're so hung up on this one thing, we want you to be able to live your life. But it felt like our main character didn't go anywhere, and what I'd read from this author before was very character driven. This is not speculative like Wrong Place, Wrong Time, but I think some of the elements of the ending are fairly similar. But I was way less emotionally invested in like everything going okay, our main character getting what she wants and deserves. I don't know that I thought the solution was 100% satisfying. It felt like it could have been a solution to another book, but in this specific situation, it felt a little bit too simple. There are elements here and there of little twists of why this specific small thing is happening that I thought were good. I thought this was okay. I think it's going to be letting a lot of people down because that synopsis is so strong, and then it kind of pumps the brakes for the rest of the book. I think I'm giving this another 3.5. I don't know how long it's going to stay in my memory, but I think it's good and some people are going to really enjoy it. And the last book that I read this month was Kaikeyi by Vaishnavi Patel. This has been on my TBR for a couple of years now, and I wanted to read it with my book club, and the ship just sailed. So I have been putting off this book that I knew I was going to enjoy for a really long time for kind of no reason. So I thought it was finally time to get to it, and I did. This is sort of a retelling of parts of the Ramayana. Kaikeyi is a character in the Ramayana. She is the mother or stepmother, depending on how you look at it, of Rama, who is a reincarnation or a host of Vishnu, who is this god who is going to rid the world of demon creatures. Kaikeyi very famously exiles Rama from the country, and she is sort of seen as a villainous character for doing so. And the author, in the author's note at the beginning of the book, says her mom and her grandmother were arguing over what Kaikeyi did. That inspired her to write this book, and I felt like I could feel the love in this book so much, of how much Patel has like lived in this story. I loved that at the beginning there's like the author's note about like the sources that she used, what she decided to change for this version of the story, how, you know, all these stories are kind of composites of different versions of the story because it's so ancient. So Kaikeyi in this book is a princess who ends up getting married off to be a queen of another country. She's going to be the third wife. She comes from a place that is not very accepting of women, and she ends up marrying a man who does respect her, and so she ends up working really hard to make sure that women have a better place. And on top of that, she also has this magical ability to see the connections between people. I thought that magic was so interesting, and how she can kind of tug on her connection with people to get them to be more convinced to do it, and how she decides to use that power. Sometimes it helps her, sometimes it hurts her. As someone who is not well versed in the Ramayana, but has read a lot of retellings, I think that this stands out as one of the best. I think it can stand on its own, but I also think that people who are more familiar with the story might get something out of seeing this character who's not really talked about and seeing things in a different way, especially because it's mostly Kaikeyi dealing with her son, who, even though he has been raised in a very loving household, who has seen women in power do good, how he ends up being corrupted by people who do not share those views. It talks about people who are jingoistic. It talks about people who want to push down women and not allow them to leave the house. Her son is essentially getting red-pilled in this book. I think that this book has so much commentary about toxic masculinity and how people are trying to undo those patterns to try to make the world a better place, and showing like what the male pushback of that is. I think that this just does such a good job talking about those things while also being a compelling character study and fantasy story. It's not very involved in the fantasy. It's not like high fantasy magic where there's a big old magic system, but it does feel like a mythology type magic. So really enjoyed this one. It was like the highlight of my day to pick this up every time, and I think this is going to be one I'm going to be recommending really widely, especially in terms of fantasy standalones. So I am giving this a 4.5 right now. It could be more than that, actually. I really enjoyed this. So those are all the books that I read this month. I accidentally kind of read The Rainbow, and it's May. I did it the wrong month, huh? So thank you so much for watching. If you would like to see more content from me, you can find me at the links in the description, or if you want to watch more of my videos, you can subscribe down below. You know where to do it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.